thank you folks for being with us. I'm Bob Sullivan. I'm the Dean of the Rady School, and I'm here simply to welcome you to a wonderful event with Seth Siegel, sponsored by the U.S. Israel Center for Innovation and Economic Sustainability. I was thinking about the bad timing of this talk as we go into an El Nino year, and that we begin to think that we really don't have a water issue in California, and in fact we will forever have a water issue here. It's not we will have these little flukes. And the issue isn't just a California issue, it's a worldwide issue. And the conversation today will be focused on the opportunities that are not only California opportunities. Israel has addressed this so that they are in a water surplus state, but that it has extensions to all of our interests worldwide. So, in order for folks who are not aware of our U.S. Israel Center, that I believe it's in our third year, I'd like to introduce Susan Lapidus, who's the executive director of the U.S. Israel Center, give you a little bit of an oversight of the center, but also then to introduce today's speaker. Susan?
Yes. I don't think I'm going to see if I need this. Do you think I need this? Okay. I can't get it out. Hi, everybody. So, Israel is a small country with a brief history as a modern state, but it has so much to offer us as far as innovation and technology, and that's where our center comes in, and we're thrilled that it was incubated here at Rady. Our mission is to connect Israelis and Americans to support opportunities for collaboration at universities, businesses, and public office. Our U.S. Israel Center facilitates interaction on some of our greatest challenges: water, as we're talking about today, energy, agritech, cybersecurity, and life sciences. It is our privilege to work together and envision a future of prosperity through innovation and collaboration for the benefit of our region, and actually globally. I hope you will take the advantage of the many opportunities to interact with our center. You're all invited to reach out to me. We have a website, a newsletter that's going out, and many opportunities to be involved. I'm going to press a button to tell you about what's coming up in the very near future. Right now, we're working on a rain barrel project. I'm really excited about this. We're piloting in San Diego Israeli technology to put 3 rain barrel systems in San Diego County elementary schools. This system is in almost every school in Israel, and we're going to start out with a school in City Heights, a school in Pacific Beach, and a school in Encinitas. So that's going to be, the rain barrels are on a container ship right now, and that's going to happen in January. Immersions. We're bringing 24 Rady students, not only Rady students, SIO students and GPS Global, is it GPS? GSB? GPS students to Israel in December and for 2 weeks. And then February 7th through 14th, 24 Israeli graduate students will be here. And I invite you all to interact and collaborate with them, because that's what will make the experience really successful. Lastly, there's a challenge that's going on right now that I'm really excited to introduce you to. It's called the SoFair competition. It's at the University of Tel Aviv, the heart of the startup nation. It's a case competition for teams. So I think it's teams of 4. You can get all the information on our website, and we will fund a team from Rady. So you have to get your application in by December 31st, and I think soon after that you find out if you're accepted. The winning prize for that is a $10,000 prize. So I hope that we get a Rady team in there. There's teams from universities all over the country, and this would be the first time that a Rady team participates. So thank you so much, and I'm going to introduce the speaker. Seth Siegel is a writer, activist, and successful serial entrepreneur. He is the author of the New York Times best-selling book, which you all have now, Let There Be Water, Israel's Solution for a Water-Starved World. These books are a gift of the Leishtag Foundation, so thank you very much, Charlene Seidel, who's here representing the foundation. Siegel's essays on water and other policy issues have appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Los Angeles Times, and in leading publications in Europe and Asia. He is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and is the co-founder of several companies, including Beanstalk, the world's leading trademark brand extension company. He is married and lives in New York City, and now it's my pleasure to welcome Seth Siegel.
Thank you very much. Hi, I hope everybody can hear me. I suspect with the microphone you can. If at any point you can't, please just raise your hand and indicate that I need to speak up or do something else to make your experience a positive one. So I want to tell you, as she said, I live in New York City. I live in Manhattan. And I've been to San Diego a handful of times. I actually, as a young lawyer, tried a case here. And then as a business person, came here a few times on business activities. But I haven't been here in a few years, and I have definitely never been on this campus. And I don't know why, but I thought because there are so many University of California schools, I thought that there were probably, somehow I thought of it sort of like a New England type of leafy campus, and there'd be like 1,200 students per year or something like that. And I drove on to, I think it's Gilman Drive or something like that, and I stopped and I asked somebody where the Rady school is. Dean, I hope this doesn't hurt your feelings. And the person said, I don't know, I never heard of it. So then I went up the road a little bit further and I stopped two more people. Do you know where it is? Nope, never heard of it. Then I stopped two men wearing maintenance uniforms from, it says University of California, San Diego. So I'm guessing these guys surely know where this building is. And one of them says to the other one, you sure it's still here on this campus? So he says, yeah, he says, but it's up somewhere over there, pointing me in exactly the wrong direction. And I am now driving around, getting ever more panicky, although I'm thinking in the back of my mind, technology will save me, because worst comes to worst, I'll pull up on a sidewalk or something and just, go to Google Maps. I'm sure it'll pop up somewhere or other and I'll find my way to the Rady School. And just then I see a bus stop up ahead and three students, and I'm trying to find where's my savior? Where is Yoshiaki? Where? Oh, there you are. And so there are three students waiting for a bus, and I pull up and I say, excuse me, do you know where the Rady School is? And Yoshiaki, who may be a classmate of some of yours, says, yeah, let me explain it to you. I'll explain it to you. And he leans into the car, Googles it just as I should have done myself, and starts to show me. And then he says, well, wait a second, I'm going there right now. Do you want? I will show you. Well, it was like miles and miles and miles from where we were. And then, I try not to make this about me, this experience. I really try to make it about the issue of the book and the issues raised in the book. But, we're all human. So we're pulling into the pre-assigned parking space where it says Seth M. Siegel. And Yoshiaki exclaims, excuse me, are you the author of Let There Be Water? I said, yes, I am. He says, I'm coming to your lecture. So, this is the 34th, 35th audience I've spoken to since I started my book tour. I've got a long road ahead of me with dozens of more cities. But this will be forever the moment I will never forget. Yoshiaki and I hope, will be lifelong friends now. I'm going to go. I don't know if you're from Tokyo or Osaka, or where are you from?
From Gotembe.
Okay, I'm visiting you there. Okay, it's done. In fact, we'll all go. Charlene, can we get a grant to do the competition there? Okay, perfect. Okay, so you all have in your hands a copy of Let There Be Water, and I know you're all brilliant students and faculty members, but I don't assume you've read it yet. So let me take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about the book. Let me tell you a little bit about how I came to write the book. And most important of all, because my goal in this is to really begin a national dialogue about water that I believe is sorely missing in the United States, even in a place like California, even in ground zero, California, about water issues. So, and part of it will come out in my presentation. Certainly a lot of it will come out in our dialogue. So I'll speak for a little while. First, let me tell you how I came to write the book. I'm a businessman, I'm a lawyer, I'm involved in a lot of community activist stuff. I go to Washington, D.C. a lot, and I lobby members of Congress on a lot of issues that I consider very important. I know lots of senators and congressmen. I've been doing this for a long time. And I'm not doing that to name drop. I'm doing that. It'll be relevant in a second, I promise. So I'm also a member, I think that was said in the introduction, a member of a foreign policy think tank called the Council on Foreign Relations. And about 4 years ago, almost randomly, I attended a seminar which had a title, not quite, but almost like The Coming Global Water Crisis. And with a title like that at a serious place like the Council on Foreign Relations, you would think it would have a crowd at least as large as this, maybe 4 or 5 times as large as this. But when I showed up, and I didn't show up for any particular reason, because the California drought, if it had even started then, was in no one's consciousness. Back east, for sure, nobody was talking about water scarcity issues. Nobody. So I go to this, and it was sparsely attended. And the fellow presenting it was not some environmental guy who, was talking about the end of the world because we're not behaving ourselves. Rather, it was a serious, sober, retired U.S. Air Force general who was at that time the head of a division at the National Intelligence Council. The National Intelligence Council is part of our federal apparatus. We have lots of intelligence agencies. They each do different things. And the National Intelligence Council's job is to assimilate the information from all of the different agencies and to write reports for the government. So think of it sort of like a faculty lounge without students, okay? And, and so this guy had written what was a classified report and had just been declassified the week or so before this meeting. And so I was among the first people to hear the story. And the story, he said, was that we are going into a global water crisis. Now, the dean in his introduction made a comment about El Nino and about how, and I assume you all know what it is, but because I'm in California, back east, I would say 1 in 500,000 people know what El Nino is, but okay. So you all know El Nino is coming, which means you'll have more rain rather than less rain, right? Okay. So what I will tell you is that's very good news in the near term, but kind of irrelevant to the thesis of the book. And thesis 4, not the book, because the book is an outgrowth of what I learned that day. And what I learned that day, according to this guy, was that the U.S. is part of course, global story, and that the reason why this is of interest to the U.S. government was because he believed, the report said, that the world would be going into a period of global water scarcity that would hit with full force by the year 2025, which is now only 9 years away. And in policy terms is like nothing because it takes more than an hour and a half to figure out solutions to big problems. And he said that 60% of the world's landmass would be hit by water scarcity issues by 2025. Now this, again, was before California and all the other stuff. And another government report, which I read later, said that 40 of our 50 U.S. states will be affected by water scarcity also, coincidentally or not, by 2025. And that therefore, this was a problem. Now, when you are going to be investing with somebody or following somebody's advice, you want to know how good they are at their predictions and what their track record is, right? I mean, it makes sense. So this was, again, about 4 years ago. At that time, there were no states substantially in drought. And today, there are 8 U.S. states that are having full-fledged, terrible droughts. There are quite another number of states that are in early stages of drought, like even the state of New Jersey is in level 1 drought conditions right now. And that you wouldn't think of a northeastern state as having that problem. Around the world today, if you want to think about the world, China is going through all kinds of horrific water scarcity issues, as is India. South Africa, in fact, much of sub-Saharan Africa is going through water scarcity problems today. You're facing a drought in parts of Mexico. Brazil, which has the mighty Amazon, the largest source of fresh water in the world, has in south of the Amazon, well south of the Amazon, has the commercial capital of the country, Sao Paulo. The greater Sao Paulo area is 40 million people. And they are having such horrific water scarcity problems that they don't have enough water to power their electric turbines, and they've been having brownouts and all kinds of energy crises there. They don't have enough, and this is like not sort of like, we think sometimes of South America in sort of stereotypically unfair Western imperialist view. We may think of them as also like living in huts or something like that. We're talking about an industrialized city that's no different from Los Angeles or Manhattan or Boston or Philadelphia, with high-rise buildings, luxury hotels, fantastic restaurants and all that. For a period earlier in this year, the water crisis became so severe in Sao Paulo that every restaurant had to shut down because there was no water to wash dishes with. I mean, that's how severe it was. We're talking about a modern city. So this is just not even 5 years. It's like less than 4 years from the time that we're at this meeting, and I hear this story. Okay, so I'm an engaged citizen, and I have 2 reactions to this presentation by this retired general. My first reaction is, hey, I'm a pretty informed citizen. I'm an engaged citizen. So why didn't I know about this? Before it comes to the word crisis, I would think I should have heard about it somewhere, I should have read about it somewhere. You know, I'm on, anybody here on Twitter? You know, it's like you get a lot of information from a lot of places. By the way, just to put in a plug, I tweet constantly about water issues now, so if you'd like to follow it, it's at Seth M. Siegel. Feel free to join me. And I would say that I saw none of it. So that was my first reaction, one of kind of annoyance. My second reaction was one of, what is this going to mean for our safety, our security, our worldview? So I went back to my office and I started reading up on what this means. And first of all, of course, we're talking about higher food prices everywhere. And for those of us who live comfortable Western lives, we could probably tolerate some extra cost to our food and our energy costs. We could probably can afford a little bit of that. But in large parts of the world, in fact, the majority of the world, even a small increase in food costs will set off kind of a mayhem. The second problem is that we can't just identify problems. We have to think about what are solutions to the problems before us. So I start reading up on the problem, and I start thinking about the solution. Now, back to what the dean said in my reaction to it. There are multiple reasons why the coming of El Nino alone will not be the solution. And that is because our coming global water crisis, or I want to drop the word coming out of the sentence, our global water problems are not just about climate change. Climate change is clearly a cause, but it's too easy of an escape route to just say, oh, well, when the climate changes some other way, we're going to all be fine. And the reason is because it's all kinds of macro reasons why we are facing severe water crisis. First of all, globally speaking, we are now about 7 billion people. No matter what we do, because of longevity and birth rates and all that, we're going to be going up to something close to 10 billion people in the coming decades. So if we have scarcity right now, what are we going to do with an extra 35, 40% increase in our global population? How are those people going to get their food? How are they going to prepare their food? How are they going to wash their bodies? How will we handle the sanitation of their wastes, our waste? How are we going to do that? So more people. Second of all, what's happening around the world today is we're not just growing larger in totality, we're growing more affluent. And that's actually very good news. For those of us who enjoy affluence, it's very easy to speak of, you know, that we think that people should reduce their lifestyles, but people who are living in dire poverty, in most grievously poor conditions, it's a welcome addition to humanity for them to be able to live a life, if not exactly like ours, then certainly better than the lives they live right now. But what is the cost in water of a middle-class lifestyle? Well, let me just give you two examples, but there are many more. First, food. There may be people here who are vegetarians or vegans. It's possible. But that is not the main diet of those of us who live in the West. And therefore, if you are living a normal Western diet, you have animal protein as a significant part of your diet. If you are a very poor person, you are living a grain-based diet. But as soon as you rise out of dire poverty into something akin to middle-class life, it doesn't have to be like country club membership, but I'm just talking about something akin to not being in dire poverty. The norm around the world is that people elevate their diets or change their diets. I don't want to be value-laden. They change their diets to animal protein-based diets: cheese, eggs, poultry, beef, pork, etc. And to take a gross example, the difference in raising a pound of corn, which is a mainstay of a staple of diet in poor countries, to raise a pound of corn versus raising a pound of beef, takes 17 times more water to raise that from one to the other. Okay, and then we've talked about climate change, but we haven't talked about taking our water resources offline. What is that about? We live in an industrialized world. Even the poor countries are industrialized now. That means chemicals are a large part of everything we do. It's the way we live our lives. It's not just pharmaceutical products. It's not just beauty products. Everything we have, this chair, this microphone, this carpet, is all made with chemical solvents of some kind. And little by little, they're dripping and dribbling into our water supply. And then at some point, the little bit becomes a little bit more. And then a little bit more becomes just too much. And it's taken offline because the water becomes toxic. It's the reason why in many villages in China, the life expectancy is in the 40s, because you drink the water there, you develop tumors, you get cancers, and you die. And that's happened in other developing countries as well. Now, we have a pretty strict regimen here in the United States, but even so, we have lots of water that's been taken offline. We don't know it, we don't see it, because it's all happening, underground and behind our eyes, but it's happening nonetheless, and water is taken offline. And at a time we need more water, we have less water. And let me share with you one or two other concerns. Infrastructure. We have infrastructure that is old and broken and decrepit. And and this will shock almost everyone, because of the fact that to just explain what I mean, after the water has been sourced and cleaned, which is expensive in carbon fuels and expensive in money, after we've gotten to that point, from the point that it's cleaned and ready to be used, from the pumping of wherever the central station is, to our homes, to the Rady school, to wherever, on average in the United States, we lose about 1/3 of our water to leaks. By the way, if you want to do something about carbon fuels and change our equation there, fix our leaks, fix our infrastructure, and you will save massive amounts. In the state of California, 18% of the state's electricity bill is spent on sourcing and pumping water, cleaning the water, heating the water, and then pumping the sewage back out to the Pacific Ocean. 18%. That is think about that, all the buildings with air conditioning and all the computers and all the refrigerators, 18% of our total water, total electricity is used in those water functions. So we're talking about a massive amount of electricity and a massive amount of infrastructure losses of water. And then there's lots of other stuff. Urbanization. People are moving all over the world more and more into cities. I mean, last time I was in San Diego, just a few years ago, it seems like the city has stretched. And what does it mean when a city grows? What is urbanization? What is the effect? What is a city made up of? It's asphalt and concrete and metal and glass, which are all great and provide us with good, safe, clean, healthy, dry, warm homes, but it also makes the soil impervious to rainfall when it does come. And so when the rain falls, it falls off of the roof and then just gets sent off to the sewer and sent off to the waterway, and we lose that water completely as well. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why this is going on. So I learned about all this, and again, as I said, I'm a business guy, and I don't want to just be complaining. I want to be thinking about what is the solution, and one of the things you think of is what's a model. And everywhere I start looking for a model, I discover to my utter amazement that Israel, little Israel, dry Israel, is the answer to one problem after the next. And the reason that that amazes me is because I had been a visitor to Israel on many occasions, and what I knew of Israel is that it's mostly desert. 60% of the country is desert, the rest is semi-arid. And I was kind of amazed to find out that in all these issues, these macro issues that I just outlined for you, that Israel has faced each and every one of them. And today, rather than having a scarcity of water, rather than having a drought, even though it's in the most water-starved part of the world, Israel has such an abundance of water today that it is able to export, give water, sell water, and export water to the Palestinians in the West Bank, and even in Gaza. Even during the summer of 2014 war, when rockets were flying out of Gaza, Israel is still pumping water every day into Gaza. And Israel also provides an enormous amount of water to the Kingdom of Jordan, for the people of Jordan themselves, and then for the million Syrian refugees who are in Jordan right now. Israel takes a large part of the responsibility for making sure that they have adequate, safe, healthy water. And in addition to all of that, Israel has a multi-billion-dollar agricultural export industry. And think about it for a second. Most of us probably are city dwellers. But what really is agriculture other than value-added water? It's a seed. You put it in the ground. The sun does what it does. And then you add lots and lots and lots and lots of water. So if you have an export industry of agriculture, think about it. That means the country has thought it out about it, hopefully enough to say that we are comfortable enough with our water future that we are prepared to export billions of gallons a year of water to Europe, to North America, to South America, to Asia, to the world. And it's a remarkable statement. So I set out on a journey to find out how this all happened. And that ended up in what sort of a kind of a Cinderella story of coming up with this book, which I'll be very candid with you, I thought was going to sell about 1,000 copies. I never expected to find the book, doing as it has done. I never expected to be, invited to speak all over the country. And so it's a very special joy, because for those of us, and I suspect this is true of every single person in this room, for those of us who seek to make an impact, to change the world for the better, I believe the greatest gift that I could give is to sort of like Paul Revere, is to ring the alarm and scream out that we have a water problem. But here's the great news. We have a water problem, and a severe water problem. But I'm not a pessimist. I'm actually an optimist. The reason why I'm an optimist is because of the fact that I have seen these identical problems in Israel. Let me give you an example. Rapid population growth. Israel achieved independence in 1948. From 1948 until the last census was taken, Israel's population has grown tenfold, the fastest growth of population in the world. Okay? Rising affluence. Israel's economy has grown in that same period 70-fold, the world's fastest, along with Singapore and South Korea. Remarkable. Climate change. Climate change. Israel's rainfall from 48 till today has fallen by 50%. Urbanization. If any of you have ever been to Tel Aviv, you understand that it seems like every week there's a new neighborhood in Tel Aviv. And so, whatever the issues are, Israel has confronted the same issues, and somehow or other has come to the day where it has actually a surplus of water so rich and so abundant that it can use it to lubricate its relationship and its diplomacy with its neighbors. It has such a robust, deep technological expertise now that it uses it on a global basis for trade. It trades water technologies with countries with which it has no diplomatic relations, and it allows it to open the door for conversation and dialogue. And so those of us who have heard the mantra that the wars of the 21st century will be fought over water. Anybody ever hear that expression? A lot of you have, almost all of you, I think, right? The wars of the 21st century will be fought over water. I don't want to say that that's impossible. It certainly is possible. But I'll tell you what I think is also possible, and this is the example from Israel, is that water, rather than being a vehicle for conflict, that Israel can be a pathway to peace, that it can be a source of communication and sharing of ideas and sharing of resources, and a model for how people in the next century, or this century, the latter part of the century, will have to cooperate, because there's no other choice than to cooperate over watersheds and water resources. And so I end this process actually feeling kind of excited. Now I'll take a couple of moments just to talk about some of the leading technologies that Israel has used and some of the leading modalities, but I'd be just as happy to talk about this in our larger conversation. So Israel did what I think is the most remarkable of things that Israel has done, is that it has, and all these things are in the book. I tell this not in an engineering way. I'm a liberal arts guy myself, and I tell the story of these kind of remarkable people who refused to accept conventional wisdom and had this idea that there's just a whole different way of looking at the world. Most of them were mocked initially, as always happens with innovators like this, and each and every one of them ended up seeing their wisdom accepted, although most of them have completely forgotten to history, and it was an honor for me to revive their life stories and to share what they did in the book. But perhaps the most remarkable of all things that Israel has done is it's rethought agriculture. And why is that the case? Agriculture is 70% on average of the water of a country's usage. So 70% in the United States of our water supply goes to agriculture. Some countries, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, are about 90%. Israel's a little under 70%. But on average, except for Singapore, which has a dry economy and has no agriculture whatsoever, on average, countries are about 70% of their water. So if you're using 70% of your water and you can figure out ways of rethinking that use of water, you're going to have a lot more security, and you're going to have a lot more water for your household use in your cities, and you don't have to have all these regulations saying, and these signs on the highway, which I'm amused by, severe drought, stop, all outdoor water use and so forth. You don't need to do those types of things, perhaps. So what Israel did, I'll just give two examples, but there are many. First is Israel invented something called drip irrigation, which is now completely the norm in Israel and has been for decades. What has been done to irrigate fields from time immemorial, perhaps we remember this from our 4th grade social studies class, or 5th grade maybe it was for you, I don't know what school you went to, but okay. But we remember that we learned about the Nile Delta in Antiquity 4,000 years ago with the Tigris-Euphrates river system, right? We remember all these things. And what did they do? They'd build trenches and they'd flood their fields, and then the fields would grow. And these great civilizations developed because of the fact that they had surplus produce. They were able to feed themselves. They got strong. They were able to build armies. And they had surplus food that they would sell to their neighbors, and that made them wealthy civilizations. Well, That, believe it or not, from 4,000 years ago, is still the most prevalent form of irrigation in the world today. We irrigate our fields primarily around the world by flooding them. So the Israelis said to themselves, the problem about that is that the majority of the water that you flood with evaporates. A large part of it dribbles pointlessly into the soil, and some percentage of it actually hits the roots as you desired. It's pretty inefficient stuff. You know, it's taking out a Super Bowl ad for trying to reach one single consumer. It's a bad idea. So what they invented is drip irrigation, which drips droplets of water on the roots, losing just about nothing to evaporation, losing just about nothing to the pointless dripping into the soil, and therefore you get a great outcome. Not only do you get a great outcome in water, but an unintended serendipitous benefit of this system, as it turns out, and I talk about why in my book, it turns out that the plants respond to this very positively. And so on average, between 25% to 100% greater yield is produced by drip irrigated fields, and in some cases as much as 500% greater. So we have controlled studies, 2 fields side by side, one flood irrigated, one drip irrigated, same seeds, same sunshine, same weather, same everything else. The drip irrigated field performs so much better. And in a world in which we're going to have food security problems, we need more food for more people, drip irrigation is an important tool. The other thing that Israel did in agriculture is they, long before there was this whole GMO debate, you know, genetically modified organisms debate, long before this, Israel made a decision, and it's a curious, I'll talk about it in the book, and if during the question and answer period, maybe I'll talk about it. It's curious how Israel got into the business. It was a response to a trauma in the society. But Israel has developed all kinds of very special seeds, again, not through GMO, through traditional breeding, that responds to otherwise worthless water. Brackish water that would be ignored or discarded, marginal water that has no other use. Israel has bred seeds that respond extremely positively to that kind of water and produce outstanding tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and melons and so forth. If anybody has ever had an Israeli fruit or vegetable, you probably know that the attribute that's most commonly spoken of in terms of an Israeli cucumber, tomato, or any of these is that it's very sweet. And it's sweet in response to this type of irrigation technique. In addition to what they did in agriculture, and I'll just take 2 more examples, but there's lots. They also, very early on, made a decision that sewage is water, and it's too precious to discard. So beginning in the early 1950s, the country developed an alternative infrastructure system to take all of the country's sewage, and it took 20 plus years to build this out. So if we think we're going to do it tomorrow here in the US, we got a couple of weeks more effort than we think we do. But they started this in the early 1950s, and they had the same yuck factor, aesthetic factor reaction there that we do everywhere. But the sense of it was that if they could treat the water to an ultra high level so that it was so clean that you could actually drink it if you had to, but you don't have to, you could reuse it for agriculture. And they were able to do something even more remarkable, and I'll talk about the environment closing my remarks. They did something even more remarkable. They were able to take and build special pipelines exclusively of this treated water and take the entire western Negev desert, and the key word in that sentence is desert, and to plant enormous numbers of acreage for farms, for peppers and cucumbers and all these other great fruits and vegetables, to give complete sustainability for the country itself, food self-sufficiency, as well as to build out this global export industry. And why is that significant? Because one of the environmental problems of our day is something called desertification, the creeping growth of deserts everywhere. And Israel is the only country in the world that ended the 20th century with less land that was desert than it started the century with. And that's because of the sewage, highly treated sewage water that is taken and shipped down to an agricultural belt and is used to develop a complete desert-based agriculture. And the final technology that I'll mention, and just in passing, and it's very pregnant with meaning right now for where you're sitting and where I'm standing, is desalination. Israel very, very early on, made a decision that they were right on the Mediterranean, and there's a lot of water there, and if only they could figure out a cost-effective way of taking the salt and other minerals out of that water, if only they could, then they believed they would be able to have a very deep and successful economy and life for their millions of immigrants. And that's exactly what they ended up doing. They never stopped experimenting on how to build out desalination. And finally, now today, Israel has recently, in the last year or so, opened up what is the world's largest, most energy efficient, lowest carbon load, cheapest cost per gallon of water desalination plant in the entire world. And that same technology is being employed at Carlsbad, which will be the largest desalination plant in the Western Hemisphere using Israeli technology. Now, I'd like to just close with one last piece, if I can. And that's, I'd like to just talk about the environment. Because it happens a lot, and I've seen this a lot in my dialogues with groups, is that people assume that this is an either-or. People assume that you can't have all this without somehow or other ravaging the environment, somehow or other creating problems. And I talk about this in the book as well. And there are, to be sure, there are costs to everything we do. Every light switch we turn on, every food article that we eat, every piece of clothing that we buy, everything we do has an environmental implication. It's obvious. We may not think about it, but it's obvious. But here's another piece of very good news. To the extent that a country or a society or a community assures the quality of its water and its water abundance, a very happy corollary is that you improve your environment. So that it's probably known by everybody here, but if not, you should know that California has shamefully, through a lack of regulation and foresight and complete abdication by our elected officials, has allowed the aquifers all up and down the state to be overpumped. It's a terrible story, and I'll be glad to talk about it more during our Q&A. And by the way, it's happening all over the world, and it's happening to a horrifically terrible degree in the center of our country in the High Plains, which is my next cause célèbre and the topic of my next book. And it is a terrible, terrible problem. But the good news is that when you figure out a way, whether through artificial sources like reusing of sewage, or through desalination, or through conservation, or through smart regulation of one kind or another, when you manage to build a dynamic water present current moment, you also give yourself a different kind of present gift. So Israel's rivers are the healthiest they have ever been because the flow is deeper, richer, fuller than it has ever been since the time of the arrival of people in the area. Israel's lake, the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus was reputed to have walked, the Sea of Galilee is its healthiest it has been in 100 years. The aquifers that lay under Israel and that Israel shares with the Palestinians in one case and not in another case, it's their own, I mean, it's in Israeli territory. Those aquifers are at a perfect balance so that the water is perfect, and so that because you have this wonderful abundance of water and you have an integrated water resource management system, you have the ability to calibrate what is the right number for your lake, for your river, for your aquifer, and you allow nature to do what it can do. You allow yourself to refill your aquifer to the level it should be at, and your lakes to the river level it should be at, because you can able to supplement during dry periods with artificial means. And when you have abundant amounts of water, then you can take more water from natural means and take a little bit less from man-made sources. And that is probably the good news. And I'll tell you, I'm going to close now with this. The reason why I'm not pessimistic about our future is that we may sleepwalk into a disaster. It's not inconceivable. We have the capacity to allow our elected officials to defer decision-making for so long that it becomes nothing but a crisis that's almost unfixable. That is certainly a possibility. But the other thing that I think is more likely is going to happen is that we're going to wake up around now, whether there's an El Nino winter or not, or year or two or three or not. And what we're going to say now is that the present course is no longer acceptable and we need to think differently. And I hope my book will play just one small part as a roadmap for what our policymakers should be thinking about. And as we sit around dinner tables and talk to other friends and talk to professors and so forth, that we need to play our part in demanding a better, safer, more secure water future for all of us. It's a cause that I've taken on for myself, and I hope that I can have you all as partners in that. And I'll stop here and take questions. Thank you. And by the way, there are things that I didn't talk about, but feel free to ask about anything that comes to mind as well. Anyway, just tell me your name and.
Hi, Mr. Siegel. My name is Cody.
Just call me Seth, but I'm good. Hi, Cody.
Right. I'm with the full-time program here. Thanks for coming out. It's really an honor to speak.
And I'll repeat for those in you back if you can't hear it.
Yeah, so basically, I guess my question is, if Israel's doing it already, from your experience lobbying in D.C., why is California not doing this? So we have the Carlsbad plant with IDE technology. It seemed like they didn't really have as much bureaucracy, but I think there's also one in LA that's been sitting on the desk of somebody's table for like 10 years, not being approved. So I guess in your experience, why are we not there yet in California?
Cody, if I could just clarify and sharpen your question, do you mean why we're not there? Do you mean in terms of desalination, or do you mean in terms of our global water smarts?
Right, not desalination, but just being self-sustaining for water.
Yeah, I think, so his question is why is it that Israel was able to get this right, and why are we in California so unable to figure it out and be self-sustaining? Is that a good summary? Okay. So you know, I'll leave it to several of you here, and obviously there are policy people here who think about this all day long. I have a couple of theories about it. And one, which is that one of the failures of our system of governance is that elected officials never want to ask citizens for any kind of sacrifice at all, even the most marginal, tiny amount of sacrifice, and that therefore they only focus on what is right in front of them right at that moment. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and I write about the second thing in my book, I write about all these things I'm going to say in my book. The second thing I would say is that, I want to say this in as gentle a way as I can, is that water has not yet had any kind of priority in the mind share of our elected officials. And there's a couple of reasons why. One of which, to be gross about it, is campaign donations. So I'll give you a challenge. I'm not going to ask you for show of hands, but I'm assuming many of you, or maybe all of you, read some, either online or the paper copy, read a daily newspaper of some kind, right? So I'll give you a little challenge. Today's Tuesday, I think, right? Tuesdays? Right, today's Tuesday. You know, it's a problem with being on tour. You kind of forget what city you're in, and, you know, that's when those rock bands say, "Yay, San Diego!" You know, it's like they have to look at their hand like, "Yay, San Diego!" So I almost said, here we are in Philadelphia. So, okay, so today's Tuesday. So why don't you do this? For the next 5 days or so, go to your daily newspaper and go to the business section and either click through or flip through and see how many days you have to go from one story about energy to the next episode where you see a story about energy. It could be coal, oil, gas, renewables, I don't care, but energy. And I'm going to, because I've done this experiment repeatedly, and I'll tell you what I found. I found I never have to go more than 2 days for stories. And I then go back and do the same exact thing about water. And you can go weeks. Now, if there's a drought story, or if you're in a town where there's a water main break, well, sure, it'll be in the news. But other than that, it's just not there. So there's no mind share by our elected officials. The big energy companies of all kinds, renewables and the traditional carbon fuel companies, are in the offices of our elected officials every day, and they're asking for special favors for sure, but they're also educating them about the issues. And we need citizens, we need environmental groups to be prioritizing this, we need citizens to making this an important issue, we need to make this something we talk about. And I'll tell you something interesting, I think. Also is a good news thing. We citizens have a lot of power. Does anyone know what April 22nd, 1970 was by any chance? Oh my God, can I sign your book later? Wow, yeah. I have asked that 34 times. This is the first time anyone ever got it right. Wow, I gotta come to California a lot more. Wow, fantastic. Wow, I'm blown up. What's your name? Ann, blow me away and blow away everyone else who called out. Wow, fantastic. Yes, it was the first Earth Day. Wow, you saw how shocked I am, because I was expecting completely nobody to know. So, you want to tell me more about it?
It started in Santa Barbara, which is just north of here, and it was the Community Environmental Council that founded it, and I think it was in response, I could be wrong, but I think it's in response to an oil spill.
I'm either going to dedicate my next book to you or put you in my will. I don't know which. But either way, let's keep in touch. So, exactly. But the other thing that's amazing about April 22nd, 1970 is that there are 4,000 approximately colleges and universities in the United States. And do you know how many colleges and universities in April of 1970 had an environmental studies major you could have? 0. Ann's right twice in a row. And I have not done a deep survey, although Ann and I are going to do this as soon as we're done here. But I'm going to guess that of the 4,000 colleges and universities and community colleges in the United States, I'm going to guess that the majority today, and maybe even a large majority, have such study programs today. So we have the ability to take water out of the School of Engineering and put it into public policy and make demands of our elected officials and have that same type of thing. And it doesn't have to be, by the way, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative. We all have an interest in this. We all have an interest in this. We have to do this right and we have to do this together. So, any other questions I'll be glad to take? Yes, please just tell me your name.
Tim Sessing.
Hi, Tim.
The Flex program here. You mentioned energy taking headlines, and I got to believe one of the reasons that it does is because it has a direct financial impact on each and every one of us, certainly through gasoline and multiple other ways. Water, we don't have that close of a monetary connection to. You're a businessman, you're talking with business people. Is there a business capitalist-oriented solution towards getting to a water-neutral position, or is it going to depend on us getting past our bias against socialists?
So Tim's question is, why aren't we charging for water, and what is the market-based solution to this problem? Is that a good summary? Okay, I know it's not exactly what you said, but if you want to know kind of one of the secrets to Israel's success, Tim hit it squarely on the head. And that is that Israel made a decision some years ago that we're not going to charge a fanciful price for water. Because most of what we do in the West is we charge nothing for water because it's a political good. You know, so it's just a good. I mean, it's like education or sunshine or whatever. It's an inexhaustible good, and we're all entitled to it. So therefore, we charge nothing for it. So it's either that, or we charge a flat fee, which, of course, if those of us who know economics, means that there's no incentive whatsoever to conserve whatsoever. Or we charge a completely fanciful price that has no bearing. It's a price, but it doesn't really reflect the cost of sourcing the water, cleaning the water, getting it to our home, getting it out of our home, and then adding in layers and layers of technology and infrastructure to get it to the right place. So in Israel, they charge for all of that in the water fee and sewage fees. They charge for all of that. And by so doing, everyone gets all the water they want, but they know they have to pay for it. So therefore, market forces have had the most remarkable impact on usage levels. Now, Israel didn't always have this system of water, market-based water approach. They did for a long time have a socialist approach. Basically, it's a common good, therefore we should have it. And then they had a sort of a fee-based system, and then finally they went to a real-world system. And you know what happened in the first year after that happened? Usage dropped 16%. And you know what happened then? They decided they're going to add it to agriculture. And farmers howled. Boy, politicians took it in the face. They hated it. And you know what happened almost immediately? Farmers started using technology to rethink their use of water. Farmers started coming up with water-saving crops. No more alfalfa and cotton in the desert kind of stuff, only smart use of crops. And so you want to get smart about technology being added to agriculture, which is a very change-averse industry. Here's the answer. Phase in smart pricing, and you will achieve unbelievable results. Because people will respond. And you know what the best present will be out of all this? Is that some tech geniuses, and some of you will be CEOs of these companies, some tech geniuses will then invent the next kind of drip irrigation or the next desalination or the next something, because if there's no price for water, there's no incentive to develop technologies, because no one would ever spend $1 to buy the technology if they're getting their water for free. The other thing, by the way, I want to just say is, in addition to that, we need to have a water policy in this country. We don't think about water as a policy issue on a national basis. We devolve it to the local community. The last time there was a national water policy board in the United States was 1973. Now, many of you weren't even born in 1973, but the world has changed a lot. Our national population has changed, where we live has changed, we moved to places where there wasn't as much water. We just aren't thinking about water in the same way as we might and we should and we must. So Israel not only charges for water and does it out of a central location, but they also do national centralized planning, and that also plays a large part. I'll take another question. I think you had to tell me your name?
Jason with the Flex Weekend.
Is it Jason?
Chase.
Oh, Chase. I'm sorry, I misheard you.
There's no change in the vowels. It's very hard to hear.
Okay.
So my question relates to the regulation and policy with regard to construction.
Yeah.
So an example in a common household.
I hate when people ask me precise questions. It means I have to actually know something. Uh-oh, keep going.
So in regard to water conservation, so in our house we have 5-gallon buckets that we fill up with water when we're taking a shower, as an example.
Yeah.
Before the water gets hot.
Yeah.
So instead we pay $250 and get what's called a water recirculator, which recirculates the water in the system, so it's constantly hot. Is there things like that that are in place in Israel and other parts of the world where it's an effort to try to conserve water that's put into policy for construction?
Yeah, very, very, very much so, by the way. Very much so in Israel and probably in other places too. For example, in Israel, using the price mechanism, was it Tim? Yeah, the conversation I had with Tim a moment ago is, for example, now if you are doing construction of an office building, an apartment building, a house, whatever, if you're the general contractor, you have to pay all kinds of fees if you haven't brought your system up to the highest level of compliance with the most energy and water efficient usage possible. They want to make it clear that you are expected to build into your new system water efficiency. And I'll give an example also of that. Something that we do every single day and several times a day, and that is use the toilet. Israel invented the dual flush toilet. It's so obvious and so commonsensical, right? I mean, we don't like to talk about it in polite company. And if there's a camera going, I really shouldn't be saying this on tape, but it's kind of like obvious, isn't it? Right? I mean, like, something doesn't require as much water pressure as something else, if I may be clear about what I'm saying. So why would you use the maximum amount of water for what you'd need a minimum amount of water for? It's crazy. So in Israel, a very long time ago, they invented the dual flush toilet, and then they mandated that every new construction, every restaurant, every public facility, every office building, and then finally, if you in your home, have the use of a dual flush toilet. And that saves a very large amount of water. Every home in Israel must have an aerator on their faucets so that you can wash your hands, you can take a shower, you can wash your vegetables, you can do all that stuff, but you're just going to do it in a more energy and water efficient way. So there's lots of stuff like that. Also, the way Israel, in the general, in household use, heats the water so that you don't have to turn on the shower and wait a long time for the water to go from cold to hot. There's a system that they have on the roofs of almost every house that keeps the water hot and flows it down to the shower so that there's a very minimal amount of time waited that you have to wait till the water gets warm. So there's a lot of stuff like that. Tell me your name. You, red sweater.
My name's Kimberly.
Kimberly?
Yes, I'm from the full-time 2016 program. My question is, what does Israel do with all of the salt from their desalination plants?
Oh, great question. Oh, great. Question is, what does Israel do with all the salt from the desalination plant? And generally that question is asked in also an environmental question of what is the meaning of life in the environment. So let me explain just very quickly how, although it's all in the book, the way it works. The desalination plant sucks in water from the sea, about a mile out in the sea, because you want the water to be a certain height. You don't want it to be like sort of at the shore. And it sucks it in, and then it goes to a central plant where, through a process, and I tell how this all got invented, how first of all, reverse osmosis, how the salt and the water are separated from each other. And then through a separate pipe, it goes back out to the sea. And on the way out to the sea, it's sent out through a diffuser so that no one area is too unduly saline. And so this salt gets separated out there. But here's the good news. We have about 4,000 desalination plants worldwide, some of them very, very small. But in terms of functionally speaking, there's only a handful that are really meaningful in terms of size and volume. There's a lot of ocean water out there. And as long as waves are going and as long as the diffusers are working properly, it seems as if that there's really no environmental load for doing that. And I know for sure, because I spoke to the people involved in this in Israel, they monitor the fish life and the marine life around the diffusers very closely to see if there's any impact on the health of aquatic life, and they say that there is not. And also, they're constantly improving the quality of the diffusers to make sure that that the salt is not really much of a problem. A secondary problem, by the way, that lots of people, just to give you some tools in case anybody raises this with you, the second complaint about desalination, people say it's very energy intensive, and it is. But every part of modern life is energy intensive. I mean, these lights don't come without cost. This building didn't get built without cost. And so if we choose to live in a modern society and not live with scarcity, we're going to pay a price in terms of energy. The effort, and there's a lot of effort about this in Israel as well, is to come up with solutions that allow us to do this through renewables rather than through carbon. And I think that's something that's well worth thinking about, whether we use tidal waves as an energy source in very sunny places like Israel, like Southern California, whether or not we can transfer parts of our real estate so that we can have enough photovoltaic energy to drive the processes as well. And that's actually, I write about in the book, is actually one of the pathways to peace, I think, that water can be. That Jordan, the country of Jordan, has mostly unoccupied territory. I mean, it's like the whole country. It's a massively large area that has not a sheep or a goat or a person on it. And Israel, it's sort of an economic development idea for the region. Israel and Jordan could share the desalinated water, and that the energy could come from the Kingdom of Jordan, where 9 months of the year, 10 months of the year, there's lots of sunshine. You'll tell me when I'm running out of time, okay? But I'm having the time of my life, and so I'm happy to keep going until dinner. Okay. Tell me your name. Tim, you already had one. Otherwise, I'll get you later, though, if we run out. Tell me your name.
I'm Danny.
Danny?
I'm at the School of Global Policy and Strategy next door. So people don't know where it is either. So.
Well, I want to tell you something. If you know Yoshiaki, he'll tell you where it is.
Earlier up in your talk, you brought up the point that a third of the water is lost in the conveyance.
Yes. The infrastructure losses.
Yeah. So California, for example, our water infrastructure is vast and it's over 50 years old now. So how did Israel, as an example, fund all the infrastructure upgrades required to maintain their infrastructure?
So the question is, how is it that Israel was able to fund its infrastructure upgrades? Because fixing infrastructure is very, very expensive. Okay, and replacing it is even more expensive. So first of all, it's through that, when I was talking with Tim about tax policy and pricing, so that was how they done it. One of the things that Israel does, which we do not do a lot of in America, is what mayors do, what county commissioners do, and it's quite outrageous, is they steal from you and they don't tell you they're stealing from you. You don't know you're being stolen from. You pay your water and sewage fees, although we've agreed that most of us don't even know what it's going for or what we're paying. You're paying water and sewage fees, assuming that it's going for, at a minimum, for water and sewage, which is a good guess. But what happens in most of America is it goes into the general budget, and because citizens are not screaming about water issues, they're yelling about parks and hospitals and broken roads and, and tax cuts and stuff like that, mayors respond to those complaints. And what we need to have is a lockbox system where, at a minimum, the small amount that we are paying for our water and sewage goes into a lockbox and is only used for that. And that's the law in Israel. Every single penny of sewage and water fees in Israel by law has to be spent on water and sewage infrastructure, management, and so forth. So that's the first thing. Second of all is, we live in a time, and this is the School of Management, we live in a time of very brilliant financial management. So if a infrastructure system has a useful life of 25, 50, 75 years, and maybe it does, you can borrow the amount you need to build out the system. You don't have to build it incrementally, and then pay it back with basically very secure bonds, because people will be using water and people will be flushing their toilets for a long time to come. So it's a pretty safe bet that you're going to pay all that off through water and sewage fees. So that's how it should be done, and that's how it is done in Israel as well. I'll take a couple more, if there are a couple more. Yes, please tell me your name.
My name is Kathy Moran.
Kathy.
Lecturer here.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi. So my understanding is that we reclaim about 2 to 3% of our water here, and Israel is somewhere in excess of 80%.
Yeah. It's a little bit higher in the U.S. It's about 7% nationally in the U.S., and it's about 86% in Israel. Yeah.
How do we get past here? It's referred to as toilet to tap.
Yeah.
How do we get to reclaiming water in a politically charged environment where no one wants to do that? Never mind that in San Diego it's already been reclaimed a number of times as it's come down the Colorado River, but it's just politically at such a hot state.
So the question is, how do we get around the toilet to tap hot potato, and how is it Israel's managed to recycling 86% of its water, and in the U.S. it's a negligible amount. So in the introduction, Susan said that I was the co-founder of what going to be a worldwide branding company. And this toilet to tap idea is such a terrible branding. I mean, it's like, how do we make people not want to participate in my program? Oh, please, stick your head in my toilet and lap away like your dog. So it's really it's partially it's branding, partially it's consumer education. But the reality is I think what Israel did is brilliant. What they do is they break the connection between the sewage and the human being. by reusing it for agriculture. And think of how brilliant even that is. I mean, think about the process. You flush your toilet, or you take your shower, then the water goes to a sewage treatment plant, and whether it's 2 hours later or a year later, because Israel has a specialized system which takes about 6 months to a year for the water to clean, it's really purely cleaned. And then it's taken by that long pipe down to the western Negev desert, and say the tomato is grown. And the tomato comes back to Tel Aviv. You eat that tomato, and 2 hours, 4 hours later, you go to the bathroom, and a year and a couple of months later, it's back in the western Negev, and it's sort of like a refutation of the laws of physics. It's unbelievable. No matter is ever destroyed. It's unbelievable. And so it's a closed loop with water also. I mean, it's really kind of remarkably smart and good. But I think that you really need leadership. You need leadership by government, you need leadership by business, you need leadership by the media, and frankly, as the crisis gets worse and worse, and it is going to get worse, we're going to have no choice really but to figure out a way to make this work. And so somebody's going to have with a better name, rather than making people want to gag and have this huge yuck factor. But once we were able to fix that piece, I will say flatly, there is no question that what Israel does today is what everyone will be doing within 10 years, 15 years at the most. There's no choice. There's no choice. So that's what happened. Yes, you in the back, please. Josh?
Going off of that question, I know we use recycled water. You can see it downstairs. It's recycled water being used for irrigation. Do we only, I'm not professional, do we only use it for non-edible crops, or do we use it?
Yeah, in California currently, it's only used for non-edible crops. Like in the Bakersfield area, the sewage of Bakersfield is reused for non-edible crops. And frankly, that's how Israel started as well. And they did a very long amount of scientific research to make sure that nobody was getting sick from farm animals eating the fodder that was grown. You know, they made sure of that, and they made sure also that none of the fruits and vegetables would make you sick. But there's enough disintermediation between the pollutant, call it, and the final product. But yes, but in the California right now, you're right. It's only for non-edible crops and for gardens and lawns and stuff like that.
Is there a reason that we haven't made that full step in agriculture? Is there a reason we're still just?
I think it's a question of like this. I think it's a question of leadership and focus and will. I think that elected officials are not asking. I'm not talking about big sacrifice here. This is not a heavy lift. Farmers don't have enough water. Farmers don't have enough water. We have a dopey policy. If you are what's called a riparian, if you are right on a waterway, you can pump. Does everyone understand how we work water in this country? Let me take a second to explain it to you. It's crazy. If you live adjacent to a river, you are allowed to pump all of the water you want. You can grow the most inefficient. You can flood irrigate alfalfa and cotton. You can waste the water, 95% of it, and there's no cost to be paid. Because the perception is that water is free. And when the system started about 150 years ago, 160 years ago, water was free because the West was sparsely populated. There was massive amounts of water, and you couldn't use it all up. So now we have historical usage patterns that whatever your great-great-grandfather had, you have. And so you can do everything except bottle it and then sell it everything else you can do without permission. And if you want to pump into an aquifer, you can drill into the aquifer regardless of the environmental costs, and you can do that without any consequences whatsoever. It's a crazy system we have, and we have to have the political will to say to people that our water future is at risk if we don't fix our governance system. We have got to do that. So I'll take one more, and then after that, I think maybe I have time for two more. Okay, go ahead. Tell me your name.
I'm Cecily. I'm in the engineering school.
Hi, Cecily.
I do just want to say that in Orange County, there's a pilot program here now for purifying water and putting it in drinking water sources.
Yes, and there's also another plan for purifying and putting it into an aquifer, which is actually, I think, a better idea because then, again, it breaks the link between the toilet to the tap idea. I think that's the approach that you're talking about. Yeah.
And I guess I was curious, in Israel, what is the kind of distribution of sources of water, percentage distribution of sources?
Does anyone have a copy of my book here? Do you have a copy of my book?
Not yet.
Okay, so tell you what. So see me right after. I painstakingly figured that somebody named Cicely somewhere was going to ask me this very question. And by the way, I'm very proud of the fact that I interviewed 220 people for the book, so that list is there, and there's hundreds of footnotes. But I'm fine here. On page 252 and 253, I have tables and charts that will absolutely answer your question. And if it doesn't, I'll give you my business card and you can follow up with me. And by the way, I'd love to have a dialogue with all of you. If you want to keep in touch, again, I said I tweet about it at Seth M. Siegel. I have a website, www.sethmsiegel.com. I blog and do podcasts about water regularly. And so if anybody wants to be part of that, I'd love to have you along for the ride. Okay, please.
Short one. Philippe from the time program. So you said that the pricing is not correct, does not reflect what the real cost of getting the water to the households and everything. What should be the correct price? How far are we from that price?
Philippe's question is, what should be the right price be? And the answer is, it reminds me of that Abraham Lincoln story. And from your accent, I'm guessing you're not from Illinois. So President Lincoln was a very tall man. And he got a letter from a little boy who said that people were mocking him because his legs were very short. And he asked him, Mr. President, how long should my legs be? And Lincoln wrote back, long enough to reach the floor. And that's the answer I'd give you as well. It depends what you want to achieve. Do you want to have desalination plants that are financed by your fees? That's one price. Do you want to have a robust infrastructure that transports your treated sewage to your agricultural belt? It's another price. It depends what you're trying to achieve. My point is that I would argue to have deep use of technology and let us pay for it. And then we'll have a happy future if we do all that. So it depends what you want to achieve. It could be a little bit, it could be a lot. It depends what you want to achieve. So I think I'll stop here. It's really terrific. If anybody wants to linger, I'm happy to sign your book if that is meaningful to anybody. Yoshiaki already has a signed copy. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Again, thank you all for being here, and check out our website and get involved with our programs. Thank you.
1:30. I get it exactly on the head. 1:30.
It's perfect. Perfect. Seth, I'm in charge of you.
Yeah. Oh. I've been dreaming of having somebody in charge of me.
I'm taking over for your wife. I'm in charge.
Thank God. I need a Jesus Lord Jewish woman.
Do you know where the community No, I'm not in the green suite. Right across from the green suite, it says U.S. Israel sent the bike streets to you go in there, and I'm just like walk on the wall.
Yeah. So if you want to answer the water part story, I'm prepared for work. Our main topic.
Hey, how are you doing?
And you know, we're like this, I started in June, my little these things never happened.
So everything goes into the same water.
There's a line.
I'll be back to talk to them. So I got to give you this one. Yeah.
Tell me your name again? I'm Gabby. Oh, that's you. Okay. Good. Okay. He knows you? Okay. Just read right up close. Question is getting
No, your address too.
I'll be back. Oh, and you're going to get such a greeting. I should know if it's A and an E or A and N.
Oh,
okay. Spell for me? T-A-N-E. So this is questions. I'm going to do a question. I think it's called engineering.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I would say somebody Israel has done in applying. Yeah. So the issue is you can't do everything.